Okay, hello. This is Ron Barton with Hillsborough County, and I understand we're live now, so I'm going to give it a few minutes and check the sign-ins, and then we will get started. So if everyone will be patient for just a minute, we'll get as many people signed on as possible. So I think part of the ground rules I guess I'll have to share are that everyone on this webinar is muted. So if you're familiar with it or not familiar with it, there's a screen where you can chat with us about any questions you have. I do want to ask that everybody share. You're free to share your questions along the way, but we'll try to address those after we make our formal comments and go through the PowerPoint. But certainly you have the opportunity to type some questions or comments in the chat, and we'll try to address as many as possible. I think another ground rule I might ask is that today certainly our objective is to give you a 30,000-foot view of the competitive sites program, and we are going to give you access and show you the actual site itself and walk through those. If you have specific questions about a unique site, that's probably a forum in which we should just get together personally by telephone and deal with that independently. I think our objective today is to give everybody an overview and to a sense of what we're doing and why we're doing it and how to interface with it. Okay, so again, I'm glancing at the logins. We have a fair amount of people, so I'm going to, in deference to everybody's time, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So what I wanted to do, this is Ron Barton, and I'm Assistant County Administrator with Hillsborough County, and economic development is a part of my purview with the county. And on the next couple of slides, I want to talk a little bit about that first before we get into competitive sites. But I'm also joined, and we'll kind of hand the baton as we go through this with Randy Smith with the Tampa Hillsborough Economic Development Corporation, and also Eric Lindstrom with Hillsborough County, who's the primary contact on the competitive sites program. So we will triple team the conversation as we go through it. But what I'd like to do first is I've got a couple of slides here that I wanted to give the audience a sense of the county and its partner, the EDC, and where we're focusing our energies related to economic development strategies for Hillsborough County. And for context, I wanted you to understand this conversation today about competitive sites and where it fits in our strategy. So you'll see this first graphic that shows bubbles, and it's in essence our Board of County Commissioners adopted economic development strategy. And it's very diverse and broad in terms of its context of what we address. And so you'll see that obviously broader vision than just economic development. We want to obviously extend economic prosperity to our community. And the areas that we want to operate in are what we've showed here in productive growth and improvement, which is really our business community. Inclusive growth and improvement, which is how do we impact the lives of our citizens through jobs and increasing wages. And sustainable growth and improvement, which is how do we use our resources, which can be money, but as we're going to talk about today, it can also be how we use our land to accomplish these economic prosperity objectives. I'm not going to get into the details of the entire strategy, but you'll see in the top left there's a bubble entitled Competitive Sites and Redevelopment. That is in fact, you know, a part of our overall economic development strategy, and something that we've talked to our board about is our intent to be more proactive with the industry in accomplishing our objectives for built environment and also creation of jobs. And if you will, we've actually talked with our board about how do we treat Hillsborough County like a REIT. And so how do we get the greatest value for our community through our land, but also through our engagement in these other areas of our strategy for how we spend our money on infrastructure, how we court targeted industries with our partner, the EDC, how do we build a quality place to attract talent. Those are all integral parts of our strategy, but I just wanted to share this slide so you get a sense of where competitive sites fits in the overall strategy. And let me hit the next button. So how do I go to the next slide? Okay, bear with me 1 second, folks. We're stuck. Hold on a minute. All right. Okay, thank you for your patience as we figure out how to forward this. Yeah, the second slide is just a variation on the theme, but these are the services that that we provide through the county, and again with our partnership with Tampa Hillsborough EDC. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but two things that we want you to appreciate is that we're engaging very actively with the real estate industry. You know, partners like FITCAR and NAOP. Individually, brokers that represent the community. So it's a comprehensive approach with dealing with the real estate industry on how to deploy land in the future and how to create opportunities for job creation. So competitive sites overview, which is the reason we're all here today. Really the intent of this program was designed so that we could better position. Initially, we started with looking at unincorporated Hillsborough County. Frankly, the county itself was less well positioned to represent itself for job creation and real estate development as our municipalities were. And we wanted to, you know, level the playing field associated with how development sites in unincorporated Hillsborough County were viewed by the marketplace. And so certainly the audience for this competitive sites program are site selectors, executives of companies that are looking to expand or relocate their businesses, and they're assessing locations and real estate options associated with that. You might add to this, obviously, the brokerage community itself and property owners are certainly the audience for the competitive sites program as well. The second bullet talks about we're really trying to put our best foot forward related to development sites in our community. So I would pause here and share a couple of comments as we go through this. The competitive sites program is not every development site available in Hillsborough County. It's not every development site available in our municipalities. It is a listing and an inventory of sites that we believe are best positioned to move to market quickly. And that's really the differential for you to understand and appreciate. So we'll talk in a few minutes about a slide that shows the criteria that we use to populate the competitive sites inventory, but it's really important to understand there are lots of development sites in our communities. The difference is they may not have the appropriate zoning at this time or the future land use. They may have infrastructure deficiencies that can't deploy the site quickly. So that's important, you know, for the audience to appreciate and understand that these are our best sites. The second I would say is recognizing that this is centric to job creation and our economic development strategy for our community. These are sites that are deployed to address office and industrial outcomes of development. So these are not sites for shopping malls. These are not sites for Walmart. These are not sites for multifamily housing. These are sites that have been pre-positioned by their owner or their owner's rep to be attractive to office and industrial development. And I wanted to make sure that that was clear. And then the last point here is this is a integral effort between the county, the jurisdictions, the city jurisdictions, and the Tampa Hillsborough Economic Development Corporation. You'll see In fact, as Randy goes through here, that the competitive sites program has been embedded in the EDC's website. We think that's where it's best positioned because they're our outward face to marketing our community. So just wanted to share that this is a collaborative effort among all of our economic development partners. I touched on this a little bit, but you know, why did we do this? It was really to address an overarching economic development strategy. We found that our community tended to be passive and reactive to development opportunities. I'm not sure that I've found that different than other places I've been in my career around the country, but we felt there was an opportunity for us to really you know, flip the table on the conversation to be much more proactive in the outcomes that we wanted to see for our community, which were higher wage jobs, companies that were going to be part of our economic future, and how could they be a part of our community, and how would land be deployed to accomplish that. So you're not surprised to see at the top that we want to attract targeted industry, high wage jobs to the county, and that's certainly one of the reasons that we're doing the competitive sites program. We also wanted to establish a set of incentives that were related to these locations, related to attracting targeted industries, and embed them in the competitive sites program so that we worked in sync between our real estate conversations with the marketplace and the incentives that we would use to induce those activities to happen. We want to maintain an inventory of competitive sites. That's pretty obvious in the website that we're dealing with here. Randy will talk about that. So we wanted to make it readily available to the marketplace, not only to companies, but to agents and to owners and developers to make it easily available and to understand what our opportunities were here. We'll talk a little bit about this, but part of our process was to consider the size of properties, their future land use positioning, the zoning, development entitlements, development readiness, and the adequacy of infrastructure to support. Again, the central theme for the purpose of this effort was to get out into the marketplace those sites that could move to outcomes for clients quickly. So we tended to, in our conversations as we did this work, we tended to talk about the ability of sites to address anything from a 12-month to an 18-month delivery schedule for construction. If it looked like there were attributes of those sites that were problematic in any of those areas that would make it a longer timeline to develop, they tended to not be the first sites that we put on the competitive site program. And I mentioned this earlier, but this is really office and industrial centric, so we're not trying to address other land uses and opportunities. And then the last one is important. What we wanted to do as a government was to better align how we spend our dollars on infrastructure in the future, roads, water and sewer systems, stormwater. How do we deploy those future capital dollars so they advantage sites that are going to meet our objectives for job creation? So that's a little bit of the economic development strategy that we wanted to utilize. I mentioned that we used some criteria to populate this, and I wanted to walk through that a little bit. Again, recognize that as we started this process, it was initially to address development sites in unincorporated Hillsborough County. And one of the reasons that we developed some of the criteria that we did was it was unique to our more suburban development patterns than they were in, say, downtown Tampa. And so you will see on this slide, when you say, well, you know, how did a site get on this competitive sites program? Number one, it obviously needed to be in our urban service boundary. For those that are in the development business, the planning business, you'll understand that this is where our board has established development patterns in which we would obviously address the delivery of infrastructure to support development. And so only in the urban service boundaries did we focus on the sites that would comprise the competitive sites program. The next for us was 12 acres or more of developable land. And the reason we did that is that we were looking for scale. So it's not that a professional services office building with some accountants and attorneys that are in a neighborhood aren't important. They are. But what we were looking for was scale of development so that we could achieve higher job creation and company attraction or expansion. And so again, the second and the third bullet kind of tie. We picked 12 acres as being a minimum scale that could allow for office and industrial development on a general basis of about 100,000 square foot or more. Again, just try to remember the program is attempting to deal with scale of development and impacts on jobs. And we use the word here manageable, transportation capacity, utility capacity, and environmental constraints. We'll show a little bit of this when we look at some of the worksheets, but part of our process here, and the difference between this and a broker, say a broker-based database, is that we as the development approval and regulatory body for Hillsborough County went and looked at every one of these sites and started to look at the infrastructure that would support development on these sites. So it wasn't just does it have entitlements and is it zoned, but does it have the infrastructure that's appropriate to house 100,000 square foot or greater of office and industrial development. So we went down a pretty comprehensive path of looking at various criteria so that the sites would be very meaningful and useful for companies and for site selection consultants as they evaluated our community. To give you some context, and this is really still work in process as we populate the website with the EDC, but this gives you a little bit of an overview of the sites that we've looked at to date. So you have 36 sites in unincorporated Hillsborough County, 28 Port of Tampa Bay sites, 31 sites in the city of Tampa, 8 with Tampa International Airport, 51 with Plant City, and 6 with Temple Terrace. So it gives you a sense of the geographic profile of the sites that you will see in our inventory as we populate them. Again, as I mentioned, we started with the unincorporated county, and then we certainly recognized that we wanted a platform that marketed and positioned all of our community for companies, for development, and for job creation. And so hence you see even our port and airport sites that have been deployed purposefully in their business plans for office and, well, primarily industrial development in the case of the 2 ports. So this gives you at least a sense of the geographic profile of the sites in our inventory. As I mentioned earlier, this topic's not one that is static. We're continuing to work particularly on integration of these sites with regulatory systems that might be able to enhance development of the sites. But we wanted to make sure that our left hand was working with our right hand related to courting companies and courting office and industrial development. So we wanted our incentives to be in sync with our objectives for outcomes for use of these sites. One that I wanted to start with for those that are local, you may be familiar with this. For those that aren't, I'll cover this a little bit in general, and that is that our Board of County Commissioners recently adopted a mobility fee program, and so this was a transition from traditionally in use in Florida of the concurrency program, and this replaces that. And but one of the things that we didn't want was the new mobility plan to have unintended consequences for large-scale office and industrial development. And so our economic development team worked with the board and our planning staff as they brought forward the new mobility fees, which will go in effect on January 1 of 2017. We wanted to ensure that we had an incentive package that traveled with the mobility plan that tended to mitigate or minimize the financial impacts of that new transportation policy on outcomes that we desired, which was, in this case, 100,000 square foot or greater of office and industrial. Or, first time I've mentioned this, but we have redevelopment area, 4 major redevelopment areas in an unincorporated county, and we actually lowered the square footage threshold for development there. And in this case, the policy allows the Economic Development Department, under certain criteria, to buy down or write down or to pay on behalf of the developer owner of that office building or that industrial building 75% of the mobility fees that would be required at CO of the buildings. So that's very, very significant in the sense that if a landowner, a developer, a company, a combination of those partners were to deliver these threshold objectives of 100,000 square feet of office and industrial, or 50,000 in our redevelopment areas, then the county would basically offset 75% of the transportation obligations, transportation fee obligations. In addition, and again, it wasn't the intent of this webinar, but in addition to that, if there's a targeted industry that's brought to bear in that office and industrial product within 1 year of CO, then the county's actually willing to reimburse that owner for the final 25% of the impact fees, I'm sorry, the mobility fees that were required for that development. So that's just a precursor. It's a very involved program. If you're a property owner, developer, or business owner, and you have detailed questions about how the buy down would work, again, you know, Eric Lindstrom, who is going to give you an overview here in a few minutes, is a good contact for Hillsborough County to give you a better view of the mobility fee buy down. In addition, and very traditional in our partnership with the EDC, we have job-oriented incentives that go to the company, but to differentiate that for those, and I think most of the folks in the audience here today, we wanted an incentive program that spoke to the owner and the developer, not necessarily to the company, and that's why the buy down on the mobility fees is important, and also why the redevelopment incentives that we developed are able to be utilized by the owner and developer, not necessarily by the company itself. So now we have a two-pronged approach to accomplish our objectives. The regulatory part of the process, and it's important, I think, that if you take away a couple of things from this conversation, it's that we wanted to build a soup to nuts process. And so this isn't just a database with sites. It's a proactive engagement with our EDC team, with our county team, and be honest, with our counterparts in our municipalities, so that we help you deliver the kinds of outcomes that move the needle for economic development. So we are engaged not just in helping profile sites, but we are walking in the door with many of our companies now and many of our developers that meet the objectives for office and industrial development, and we are participating with our regulatory bodies as we move through from pre-development meetings all the way through receiving your permits, building your product, and receiving your COs. And so it's really an omnibudsman type process in which our team isn't just profiling good sites for you to be successful in meeting your business objectives. It's also helping you come in the door and exit the door in a timely manner and to meet the objectives of your investment objectives or your company's objectives. So we're working on additional enhancements to zoning that could impact sites, and we have here a listing on FAR bonuses, and we're looking at moving forward with some comp plan amendments that might give bonuses for FAR for certain objectives. We're leaning in with many of our applicants on parking, setbacks, stormwaters, even recently tree mitigation conversation. So again, I just wanted to leave you with the thought that your identification of a site here for business objective is really just one part of the platform of services that the EDC and the county are providing for you. And we encourage you to pick up the phone and ask us about how we can help you get to the finish line quicker. I wanted to give you a couple of examples. You might say, okay, I kind of get where we're going, but what's it look like in the end game? We've listed here for Hillsborough County 3 competitive sites. These were sites that we identified when we started this effort really almost 2 years ago. And I wanted to put it kind of a name and a face with the end game for competitive sites. And so what you see here on this site or this slide are 3 sites, what we call competitive site 14. It's just a nomenclature that we use to keep track. Was the Amazon site in South Hillsborough County. Again, 1.1 million square foot of fulfillment warehouse for Amazon. What in each of these cases, the thing that I wanted to share was actually the comment I just made, which is it wasn't just our ability to put a premier site in front of an end user and have them move forward with a transaction and development. It was our hand-holding in each of these cases with our regulatory body so that we facilitated the outcomes that you were looking for, which was timely completion of construction and occupancy of a building by a tenant or an owner of the building. So the Amazon building was a good example. The USAA was a competitive site just off of the crosstown, 420,000 square feet of office. And a third one that we just use here as an example, competitive site 48, Cabot Crosstown. Again, it was near the Crosstown Expressway. It's 150,000 square feet of spec distribution, which quickly was leased by Coca-Cola. And so wanted to just kind of put a face and an end game to the process that we're trying to encourage here with the real estate development community. So with that, hopefully you at least have a sense of the overarching intent of the Competitive Sites Program. As I mentioned, a lot of our objectives here were to move from your regulatory body being reactive to actually being proactive in helping you achieve the outcomes that also help us achieve our economic development objectives. Again, I will say these are not all sites for future development in our community, but they are the ones that can make a difference in moving product to market quickly, and that's why we wanted to highlight them. So at this juncture, I'm going to switch the headset and share it with Randy and let him walk you through the website at the EDC so you could have a sense of how to begin to access the information.
Thank you, Ron, and good afternoon, everyone. Appreciate everyone attending today. We're going to go live on our website to kind of give you a walkthrough on some of the things and the features, particularly relating to competitive sites, but also to our property database. I will say I'm Director of Research here with the EDC and have been managing our real estate database for about 4 years now. And we have a very robust site of office, industrial, and land sites available in Hillsborough County and the municipalities. And we would invite anyone listening, if they have an interest in participating in the database. It's completely free. If you would contact me, we can get you set up so that you can post properties on the site and be active active here. Couple of things that we added for the competitive sites that are new to our website, and we're looking at our homepage right now. But if you go to the site selection tab on the top right of the screen, it'll bring you into our site selection page, and with competitive sites on the left-hand side tab. And that brings up the USAA Crosstown campus that Ron was referring to as the image. And it gives you just a brief overview of competitive sites and why, what is a competitive sites and why choose Hillsborough. We also have created a short one-page competitive sites brochure, which is downloadable and might be handy for information to take away if you're presenting this to anyone. Okay, and now I'll go to the to the property database, and if you go back up to the top of the screen, to the extreme right-hand side, there's the real estate database GIS. Click on that link, and that brings you into our main property database for the EDC. What we wanted to do was create an easy way for people to recognize and access competitive sites. So we did a couple of things that would help make that process easier. We created a separate tab for the competitive sites, which you can see is a little different, kind of a greenish color. And if you click on that, it brings up a little informational screen to explain to newcomers a little bit about the competitive sites program, with links to the Hillsborough County and to our competitive sites webpage. But it also will show with an icon that we developed the locations for these sites within the county. And it also has a listing where you can scroll down and see the various sites listed out. One of the powerful things with a GIS system is the ability to create reports and to generate data for specific sites. And if we pick a site, we can, if say a user is going in and looking at different locations within the county, and they see a location that is of interest, they can click on that site, and it'll bring up a little bit of information about the site, and it'll give them the ability to generate reports from that are custom designed for that site. Among the things that you'll see here on the right are labor force, demographics, consumer spending, and business reports. I'll go through one report just to give you an idea of how these can be generated. If we go to labor force and we click on that link, it will automatically pull up a report which is has to do with the labor force for that particular location. The default is a 10-mile radius of the site, but below that, if you scroll down, you can start to see a lot of the information that's available for that particular location. It talks about establishments, employees by major industry. It talks about total employees by different establishments. And you can scroll down and see there's a lot of information available. You can also customize by radius or drive time. And if we wanted to make this a 5-mile radius, we can modify the report, and instantly it changes the data to reflect the new criteria. You'll notice that all the information that's presented in the reports is current. This is 2016 data, and all the the GIS data is updated automatically and on a regular basis, so you can be assured that you're always getting the most current data. Some of the other reports that are available, and I'll just flip through these quickly. We've got demographics, and you can get an idea. It presents a real nice graphic visual presentation too. And one of the things that I'll mention, these are easily exportable. If you would like to download these, you just go up to the screen here, hit Export PDF. We can put in a title. And it'll export that in a PDF format that you can download and print out and use as part of presentations or any informational packages that you're putting together. And there's similar reports for consumer spending, wages, business, talent pool, and housing. The other part of the GIS system allows you to go back. We can go back and look at other sites and pull them up and also scroll down into various locations, and we can switch from a road view to an aerial view. So you get the benefit of being able to identify the surrounding area and what features are available in those areas. In order to get the details for the competitive site, you just simply click on the site and click on the hyperlink in the site to bring you directly to the property. Once you're there, you can scroll down and you'll see the data that has been built into the database that gives different attributes of the site. Primarily location and size are one of the major factors. The other information has to do with the zoning for the site. And there's also a particular report that was done by the Hillsborough County staff for each site, and it contains a lot of information which is not normally found, and Ron alluded to this in his presentation, that talks to infrastructure, entitlements, and so forth. We can bring that up, and these reports also are attached to each property, and they are a PDF format. They can be downloaded, they can be printed out. So it presents a lot of detailed information, which is certainly of interest for developers or anyone that's seriously looking at a site for future development. To explain some of the terms and some of the data that was collected for these reports, I'm going to ask Eric to give you a little more detail on that and how this information was put together.
Thank you, Randy. Once again, this is Eric Lindstrom, the Competitive Sites and Redevelopment Manager for Hillsborough County. Well, what we did initially is we developed what we call the competitive site file form, which is the document that you're looking at on the screen. What we wanted to do here was try to pull together as much information that the county has at their disposal. They have a very robust GIS group here who keeps track of a number of things that would affect the development of a site. Starting from the top, what we did was we tried to list information about the site itself. We put some acreage numbers in there, as well as you know, if it had a PD or a zoning applied to it that had a number issued, we referenced that number. We decided to categorize a number of elements that would affect the development of the site according to the listing that's on the site file form, starting with the economic side of things, and you'll see right there it lists the zoning type. We created a table to develop an understanding of what's on the site currently, and then how much land is available to be developed. We looked at entitlements that might have been assigned to that site through such as a PD or a DRI that may have been issued in the past, and try to determine from that information entitlements still to be developed. And then took it one step further. We looked at wetland issues or other issues on that site that may affect the total acreage that could be developed. So you'll see that chart has a couple of headings there, the acreages, estimated development that's occurred to date, and then what is remaining after you subtract out wetlands and other types of land uses that may impact developability. Moving down the list, we kind of went through some zoning regulatory criteria that may affect the site, such as airport height zones. You'll note that there's 3 airports that are evenly spread out through the county, so they have zones of influence that may come into play around those airports that could affect the site. So if that comes into play, that's referenced on the site file form. We also identified capital improvement programs, projects that can be accessed that could come into play, that could either that could help facilitate the development of that site, or maybe improvements going on nearby that would be of interest to a site owner or developer or a company. Another thing that the county has is they have a number of community plans that affect sites, so we've referenced those as well. So if you're within one of those plans, you'll know which one it is, and if there's criteria that could affect that site, you can access that through our program to figure out what that might be. The second category we looked at was utility infrastructure. We thought it would be very important to understand stormwater, wastewater, potable water locations, where those lines are in relation to the site, and how easy or difficult it would be to access those lines. So you have that information readily available on this site. You can see here it's pretty close. Most of the infrastructures within 0 to 7 feet from the site. So from a utility infrastructure perspective, this site that you're looking at would be fairly easy developable. The third was road infrastructure. As many of you know, there is a lot of traffic in Tampa and Hillsborough County, so it's important to understand what the levels of service are on those roadways. So that has been identified under this category. And then the last category is environmental. There's a number of issues that could affect, once again, the development of that site. So we looked at a number of issues associated with that, such as whether you're either on or adjacent to ELAP properties, if there's a brownfield on the site, or you have known petroleum contamination issues that might affect that site, whether there's landfill either partially on it or adjacent to the site. But one of the more important things, since many of these issues didn't come into play on most of our sites out in the unincorporated area, was the wetland issue, because that does affect many of our sites. So that information is laid out on this site file form. One thing we did do to double check GIS information is we had set up a group of folks within the county who heads up different aspects of these criteria, such as our development services folks or our utility folks, road infrastructure, what have you, the environmental. We work with the EPC. So they reviewed all this information to double check its accuracy as best can be done at a 30,000 foot level, what we're doing here. Obviously, when it comes time to develop a site, you may need to do a little more due diligence on an engineering perspective to get down to the nitty-gritty of what's being shown here. But we feel like this is enough information when you're looking for a site to get a pretty good feel as to, you know, how difficult or how easy is it going to be to develop this site. One thing Ron had mentioned earlier was this is an inventory of vacant sites, which the last column in that economic box that shows what development is remaining. So there may be buildings on some of these sites, but essentially what these site file forms are for the what's remaining and what's considered vacant land, 12 acres or larger, and could support a 100,000 square foot office or industrial site or larger. You'll notice that on all these site file forms, the remaining entitlements are going to be 100,000 square feet or larger. So that's how we came up with our final list, was we wanted to make sure that of all those sites that had entitlements, there were sufficient entitlements to quickly go to market on these sites. Down at the bottom, you'll see a legend, which gives you additional information on what the type of infrastructure is, depending on what it is, such as the potable water, you know, whether they're pressurized mains or just lateral lines. So there's a lot of good information here to help you make a quicker decision as to whether this site's going to work for you or not. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ron.
Okay, this is Ron again, and we are kind of brought to closure the formal part of this webinar. I'm going to scroll through and see if we have some questions, and certainly I encourage you, if you want to, use the chat function and ask any questions. Again, if it's fairly detailed or very specific to a unique site, I would just encourage you to pick up the phone and let's get together in that format. But if there's something that is kind of high level in terms of trying to understand what we're doing here, I would say this, that, you know, we have spent a lot of time making sure that this was not a static program. So we have, in fact, linked our competitive sites program to our zoning desk. So we are evaluating real-time properties that come in for rezoning that either, as you might imagine, take a site off our site because they rezoned it from, let's say, office to multifamily, God forbid. And but also building permits. Again, it's in a dynamic environment. Sites are getting built on, and we need to understand what's happening there as well. So we do think we've kind of built in an evergreen process here so that we could continue to populate the competitive sites with new ones, and we also will monitor them as they are used up and have met the objectives and they no longer have development capability. We'll remove them from the site. All right, let me see if I can maneuver the chat. Okay, so Jake, hey Jake, his question is, there a way to see only competitive sites in Plant City? So is there a function to choose geographically? Okay, I'm going to switch it to Randy since that's his forte.
Yeah, Jake, we do have filters in place that are incorporated in our GIS database that allows you to filter for different criteria. And certainly, once the sites are, you can go in and select competitive sites, and then you can select other criteria to go in conjunction with that if you want to do a more concentrated or a more localized search. And that's fairly easy to do. I can show you a little bit about that right here. Let's see. let's see. Where's the, I'm sorry, back, wait a minute. No, I'm trying to get back to the website here. Sorry for the, that's what I, no. We'll be with you just a second here, Jake. We're just trying to get, I think we got out of our site here and we're trying to get back in. All right, if you go into the real estate database and you scroll down and you'll see, first of all, you want to pick sites, and then you can create filters for that, and you can pick competitive sites, and you can select cities or different areas that you want to search in. I don't believe we have any particular sites in Plant City at this time, but as they're added, it will give you the capability to be able to find those sites. And one of the things that we want to make everyone aware of is that this is a work in progress. This was the initial phase one to get the sites uploaded into our database. The county has a lot of other information they're assimilating and putting together for us to be able to upload into our site. So this will be, as time goes on, you will see that we will build this inventory and we'll be adding additional sites certainly in the future. Let's see.
Okay, I think we're going to close out. I think we're probably at everybody's time limit. We appreciate everybody joining us and also just indulging as we experiment with this medium. But certainly, I think one of the things, if I can get back to the PowerPoint, the last one. That's, so if you're wondering what Eric looks like, that's him. And so, you know, jot the phone number down. Eric's our day-to-day resource, as well as Randy at the EDC. So please don't hesitate to pick up a phone, send an email, and we'd love to interface with you. Again, it's, as Randy mentioned, it's work in process. We're getting everybody, all the sites added, but we had to load a minimum number for a trade show that the EDC was attending, and we wanted to make sure we had some representation of sites. And the other is, if you, a frequent phone call we get is, I have a site, can I be in the competitive sites program? We would welcome that conversation. As you can tell from what we've done today, there's a certain set of criteria that relate to that, and we'd be happy to walk through those with you. So I think with that, I'm going to glance right over at the chat one more time. So is Jake. And then Chase. Not sure what Chase is asking. So anyway, thank you for joining us. If you want more detailed information, be happy to chat with you about it. So have a good afternoon. Thank you.